The battlefield was quiet, but the silence was heavy. Smoke rose from the ruins of the alien village, twisting into the sky like gray fingers. The ground was littered with broken structures, torn metal, and strange alien plants crushed underfoot. Ethan Cole moved slowly, scanning the area. His boots sank into soft ash, and he could hear the faint crackle of fires that still burned in some corners. He had fought in many battles, but this one felt different. It was not just about soldiers or territory. It was about lives lost, and he could feel it in the air. Amid the rubble, a sound cut through the quiet. It was a sharp, high-pitched cry, a sound so desperate it made him pause. Ethan's eyes scanned the wreckage until he saw her. She was standing a few yards away, her silver skin glimmering faintly in the dim light. Her green eyes, pale and wide, were filled with fear and exhaustion. She held a small infant in her arms, wrapped in tattered cloth. The baby's cries pierced the silence, relentless and painful to hear. The alien woman tried to soothe it, rocking it gently, but every movement seemed to make the crying worse. Medics approached cautiously, carrying small equipment bags. Private Laura Hill stepped forward and spoke softly, her voice trying to reach the woman. "It's okay, we can help," she said. But the alien woman flinched. She shook her head and tightened her grip on the baby. Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. She did not trust them. She had survived the bombing, the death of her village, and now she had to protect her child from these strangers. Ethan stayed back, observing quietly. He had seen fear and grief in soldiers, but there was something different about this moment. The alien woman was alone, her people scattered, and her child was vulnerable. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every medic's step seemed to increase her fear. She was not aggressive. She was desperate. She did not want help. She wanted her child safe, and she believed no human could offer that. The baby's cries grew louder. It was more than hunger or discomfort. It was pain, a kind of pain that came from fear and the memory of explosions. The alien woman's shoulders shook as she whispered in her language, words that no one could understand. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to do something, but he did not want to scare her further. He took a careful step forward. The dust rose around him as he moved slowly, hands open, empty, showing he meant no harm. He knelt a few feet away from her, keeping his eyes calm and focused. "It's okay," he said, his voice low and steady. The words were meaningless to her, but the sound was soft, rhythmic, and different from the harsh noises of the battle. The baby paused for a moment, tilting its head, eyes wide. The alien woman looked at him, her green eyes narrowing, uncertain. Ethan smiled gently, showing no threat, no anger, only patience. The medics whispered among themselves. "Do you think he can calm it?" one asked. Ethan shook his head. He did not know. He only felt that something inside him had to try. The alien woman's arms shook as she held the child tighter. Ethan took another step, careful, slow. He could see her heart pounding in her chest. Fear and exhaustion battled each other in her face. He spoke again, softly, repeating the same low, calm tone. Then slowly the alien woman did something unexpected. She extended her hands, offering the baby to him. It was tentative, like a test. Ethan's heart raced. He took the child carefully, cradling it as if it were the most precious thing in the universe, because in that moment, it was. The baby's cries slowed, then stopped. It looked up at him, eyes bright and curious. Silence fell over the area. Even the wind seemed to pause, listening. The alien woman stared, her lips trembling, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She whispered something, a single word, over and over. Ethan did not understand, but he could feel the weight of it, the gratitude and disbelief mixed together. Private Hill stepped closer, her eyes wide. "How did you do that?" she asked in a whisper. Ethan shook his head, still holding the baby gently. "I don't know," he admitted. He had only moved slowly, spoken calmly, and shown care. That had been enough. For this small being, for this mother. It had been everything. The alien woman, who had thought all humans were monsters, took a careful step closer. Ethan kept the baby between them, showing he meant no harm. She studied him, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the way he blinked slowly, the calm of his movements. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she reached out, touching his arm lightly, testing if this human could be trusted. Ethan did not flinch. He stayed still, patient. The baby cooed softly in his arms, looking between them both, sensing the tension and the trust growing. Hours passed like this. Ethan stayed with them, speaking softly, not with words they could understand, but with a tone of care and calmness. The alien woman finally lowered herself to the ground, sitting with her back against the wall of the ruins. The baby rested between them, and its breathing slowed, peaceful for the first time in days. Ethan looked at the destruction around them, the ruined buildings, the burned plants, the shattered streets. It was a world of war and death. But in this small space there was a fragile moment of life, a small spark of hope. The medics began their work more carefully, observing how the baby responded. Ethan helped when he could, handing water and gently touching the baby's forehead to soothe it. He realized that the baby's cries were not just noise, they were communication. The infant was responding to fear, to the tone of voices, to the calm energy around it. Ethan had no idea why, but he felt a deep responsibility. If he failed, the cries would return. If he succeeded, he could protect this child and show the alien woman that not all humans were killers. By nightfall, a small fire burned nearby. The alien woman, Lyra, had begun to trust him enough to sit closer. She did not speak in words he could understand, but she hummed softly, a low melodic sound. The baby responded, cooing in time with her hum. Ethan watched quietly, feeling a strange connection. It was more than survival. It was understanding, a bridge across worlds built with patience, care, and a calm voice. He thought about his family back on Earth, about the small comforts they had taken for granted, here among the ruins with an alien mother and her child. He realized that humanity's greatest power was not weapons or ships, but empathy. He had no idea what would happen next. Orders would come, decisions would be made, and the battlefield was still dangerous. But for this moment, he had done what mattered most. He had stopped the cries, and in doing so, he had begun to rewrite a small piece of history. Lyra finally spoke in broken English, her voice trembling. "Thank you," she said. Ethan nodded. He smiled faintly. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "We just need to keep safe." The baby stirred in his arms, stretching tiny hands, and then settled again. Ethan realized he had never felt more alive in his life. This was not about glory, medals, or orders. This was about life, fragile and precious, and he understood that even the smallest act of care could ripple into something greater. Outside, the wind carried the smell of smoke and ash. The night was quiet now, except for the faint crackle of the fire. Ethan stayed with them, watching the stars through the broken roof of the ruins. He did not know if the war would end soon, or if this small village would ever be rebuilt. But he knew one thing. This child, this alien woman, had trusted him, and he would not fail them. He could feel it in the soft rise and fall of the baby's chest, in the cautious touch of Lyra's hand, and in the fragile hope that hung in the air. And in that moment, among ruins and despair, Ethan Cole made a promise, not in words but in action. He would protect them no matter what. He would be the calm in the storm, the bridge between worlds. He would show them that humans could be more than what war and fear had made them. The cries had stopped, but the journey was just beginning. The next morning, the ruins were quiet. Smoke still rose from some corners, but the sharp smell of burning was fading. Ethan had stayed near Lyra and her baby through the night, keeping watch. The baby slept peacefully now, wrapped in soft cloth provided by the medics. Lyra had stayed close, her silver skin pale under the morning light, her green eyes alert but calmer than the day before. She had not spoken much, only humming softly to the baby, but Ethan could see the trust in her eyes growing. He moved slowly, careful not to startle them. He had learned that sudden movements or loud sounds would make the baby cry again. He knelt nearby, cleaning some debris from the ground, and looked at Lyra. She watched him, her expression a mixture of caution and curiosity. Ethan realized that she was studying him, trying to understand him just as he was trying to understand her. They were both learning that communication could happen without words, with actions and tones. The medics came over carrying small containers of food. Private Hill spoke softly to Lyra, offering water and some basic rations. Lyra shook her head, refusing politely. Ethan realized she did not understand them, but she understood their intention. He stepped forward and helped, offering a few small bites of food to the baby. The infant reached out with tiny hands and grabbed the pieces, exploring them with curiosity. The baby's trust in Ethan was clear, and Lyra's trust was growing. As the morning passed, Ethan began to talk softly to the baby, repeating low tones and calm words. The baby listened, cooed, and sometimes reached for his face. Lyra watched this, her eyes widening in surprise. She had never seen a human connect with a child like this. She did not understand why the baby listened to him, why the cries stopped when he spoke, but she felt relief and wonder. For the first time since the bombing, she felt a small sense of hope. Ethan began to teach her simple English words. He showed her the word safe on a small tablet, pointing to the baby and then to her. Lyra repeated it slowly, trying to match the sounds. "Safe," she whispered, then looked at Ethan. He smiled and nodded. The baby gurgled happily, stretching its tiny arms. Ethan realized that teaching her small words was also teaching her that humans could care, that communication was possible across worlds. Hours passed and Ethan and Lyra worked together. He showed her how to change the baby's cloth, how to check if it was hungry, and how to soothe it when it fussed. She watched carefully, her eyes following every motion. She began to mimic him, slowly gaining confidence. The baby responded positively, smiling when both of them made gentle sounds and rhythmic movements. Ethan thought about how different this was from any human baby he had cared for. It was smaller, more fragile, but full of intelligence and sensitivity. At noon, a small group of alien survivors approached from the edge of the ruins. They were cautious, armed, and tense. Lyra stood up quickly, holding her baby close. Ethan stepped in front of her, hands raised, showing he meant no harm. The aliens hesitated, then lowered their weapons when they saw the baby. Lyra spoke in her language, a soft, quick exchange of words. Ethan did not understand, but he could see relief on their faces. They began to help, carrying supplies and water, and the small group settled nearby. Ethan and Lyra continued to work with the baby, introducing it to the other survivors. The child responded positively to Ethan's voice, cooing and smiling. Lyra noticed the change in the group's attitude. They were wary of humans, but seeing Ethan calm, the baby made them pause, question their fears, and begin to see that humans could be allies, not just enemies. Ethan felt a sense of pride but also responsibility. The baby's trust was fragile and he had to maintain it. That afternoon, the sky darkened with clouds and a faint rain began to fall. The survivors hurried to set up makeshift shelters. Ethan helped Lyra move the baby under a tarp, shielding it from the rain. He spoke softly, humming a calm rhythm. The baby listened, reaching out for him and then curling against Lyra. She looked at Ethan, tears welling in her eyes. You are good," she said slowly, struggling with the English words. Ethan nodded, smiling gently. "We do what we can," he replied. As evening approached, Ethan and Lyra sat beside the fire with the baby between them. The child's tiny fingers explored their hands and faces, giggling softly. Lyra spoke in her language, telling Ethan stories of her village, of her people, and of the baby's first days. Ethan listened, nodding, trying to understand through gestures and tone. He could not know the exact meaning, but he understood the feelings: love, loss, and hope. The baby cooed and reached for Ethan again. He leaned down, holding it close, speaking softly. Lyra watched, fascinated. She did not know why the baby responded so strongly to his voice. She had tried to calm it herself, but nothing worked as well. Ethan realized it was not magic or luck, it was patience, calm, and care. The baby trusted him because it felt safe. Lyra began to understand that trust could cross boundaries even between species. That night, as the rain continued, Ethan stayed awake, watching over them. Lyra had fallen asleep beside the baby, her hand resting lightly on its small back. Ethan thought about the battlefield, about the destruction and death surrounding them. He knew that the war would continue, that dangers were everywhere. Yet, in this small corner of the world, he had created safety. The baby slept peacefully. The mother trusted him, and for a few hours there was no fear. He thought about the future. Orders would come from command. Humans would want information, resources, and control. Scientists would want to study the baby. Aliens would want protection. And yet he could not allow the child to be harmed. He promised himself silently that he would protect both Lyra and the baby, no matter the cost. He realized that sometimes the most important battles were not fought with weapons, but with care, patience, and courage. The first stars appeared in the night sky, reflected in the silver of Lyra's skin and the bright green of her eyes. Ethan sat quietly, the baby in his arms, listening to the soft breathing of both mother and child. He felt a deep connection forming, a bond that was stronger than fear or hate. He knew that this bond could change things. Maybe not the war, but the way humans and aliens saw each other. It was a small hope, fragile but real. Throughout the night, Ethan whispered soft words to the baby, telling it that it was safe, that it was loved, and that it had a future. The child listened, its small body relaxed, and even Lyra smiled in her sleep. Ethan realized that this was not just a moment, it was a turning point. He had shown that humans could protect, that they could care, and that empathy could cross worlds. As dawn approached, the first light touched the ruins. Ethan and Lyra woke slowly. The baby nestled between them. The fire had burned low and smoke rose in thin tendrils. The world outside was still dangerous, still full of uncertainty. But inside this small circle there was life, hope, and trust. Ethan looked at Lyra and smiled. She returned the gesture, weak but genuine. The baby reached for both of them, gurgling happily. Ethan stood and stretched, preparing for another day. He knew the challenges ahead: supplies, protection, and the constant threat of soldiers or raiders. But he also knew the strength of what they had built in the past day. Trust, care, and courage. It was fragile, yes, but real. He would fight for it, protect it, and teach others that kindness could exist even in the darkest of times. He handed the baby gently back to Lyra for a moment, letting her feel the joy and relief of her child's safety. She smiled, a true smile for the first time since the bombing. "Thank you," she whispered again, softly, shakily. Ethan shook his head. "No need," he said. "We do this together." The baby cooed, sensing the bond between them, and Lyra laughed softly, a sound like wind through leaves. Throughout the day, Ethan and Lyra continued to care for the baby, teaching, learning, and connecting. Small moments of joy appeared amidst the ruins: giggles, coos, shared smiles. Ethan realized that even in a world of destruction, life persisted, and sometimes it was the simplest acts, calm voices, gentle hands, patient care, that could create miracles. He felt proud, not as a soldier, but as a human being. By nightfall, Ethan looked at the stars again, holding the baby, feeling the warmth of life against the cold ruins. Lyra rested beside him, speaking softly in her language. He did not understand all the words, but he understood the meaning: hope, gratitude, and trust. And in that moment he knew that he had changed something. The baby's cries had stopped, yes, but more importantly, a bridge had been built between human and alien. A bridge of care, patience, and compassion. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling the small weight of the baby in his arms. He thought about the days ahead, the dangers and the challenges, but he also thought about the power of simple kindness. He had saved a life, and in doing so, he had reminded himself what it meant to be human. And in the small circle of firelight, surrounded by ruins and uncertainty, there was peace, a fragile, precious peace, held together by a human soldier, an alien mother, and a tiny infant whose cries had finally stopped. Days passed since Ethan first held the alien baby in his arms. The battlefield around the ruins was quiet for now, but the air still carried smoke and the faint smell of burned metal. Ethan had not left Lyra and her child's side for more than a few minutes. He helped gather water, food, and blankets from the nearby human base, and he shared them carefully with the small group of alien survivors who had joined them. Lyra watched him closely, sometimes repeating the words he spoke, learning slowly, and sometimes just observing his movements. The baby had grown calmer and happier. It now responded immediately to Ethan's voice, cooing and reaching for him whenever he came near. Lyra could not understand why the child responded to him and not to her. She had tried every method she knew, humming softly, rocking gently, whispering words in her language, but nothing worked like Ethan's simple tone. Sometimes she felt frustration, sometimes fear, and sometimes awe. She began to speak to him in broken English, asking questions about his voice, about why he was so calm, and about what he had done to make the baby stop crying. Ethan would shrug gently, smiling softly. "I just stay calm," he would say. "That's all." The alien survivors began to notice. They watched silently as Ethan cared for the baby, how he spoke to it, how he soothed it. Some of them exchanged uncertain glances. They had always believed humans were dangerous, violent, and selfish, but here was a human soldier who protected a child, who had saved a life, and who had earned the trust of an alien mother. Quietly, small seeds of respect began to grow. Lyra started to open up more. She told Ethan about her village, the people who had lived there, and the history of her people. She spoke slowly, pointing to pictures she drew in the dirt showing homes, gardens, and families. Ethan listened carefully, nodding and asking questions, learning through gestures, tone, and patience. He began to understand not just her words but her feelings, the fear, the sorrow, and the love she carried for her child. One morning, Ethan noticed something strange. The baby was fussing more than usual, restless and uneasy. He spoke softly, humming a low, gentle tune, and the baby calmed. Lyra watched in amazement. It listens only to you," she whispered. Ethan shrugged, unsure. "I think it feels safe with me," he said. "Maybe that's all it needs." Lyra studied him, wonder and gratitude in her eyes. "You are special," she said softly. Ethan shook his head, smiling gently. "I just do what is right." As the days continued, Ethan and Lyra developed a quiet routine. They shared meals, cared for the baby together, and spent hours speaking, teaching, and learning. Ethan taught Lyra simple English words while she taught him words from her language. They discovered that even without full understanding, tone, gesture, and patience could build trust. The baby thrived under their care, growing stronger and more curious each day. One afternoon, a small human patrol approached. Ethan quickly stepped in front of Lyra and the baby, hands raised in peace. The patrol stopped, confused at the sight of a human kneeling with an alien infant. Private Hill, the medic, explained the situation. The captain arrived shortly after, frowning. "What is this?" he asked sharply. Ethan stood holding the baby carefully. "She and her child need protection," he said calmly. "The baby is sensitive to stress. I am keeping it safe." The captain frowned but nodded slowly. "We will monitor," he said, though his tone was skeptical. That night, as the alien survivors huddled under makeshift shelters, Lyra spoke to Ethan quietly. "They do not trust you," she said. "But I do." Ethan shook his head gently. "I cannot make them trust me," he said. "I can only do my best to protect you and your child." She nodded, understanding. The baby slept between them, its breathing steady and soft, and Lyra placed her hand gently on Ethan's arm. "Thank you," she whispered, and he smiled. Soon, Ethan noticed another strange detail. The baby did not cry from hunger or discomfort when he fed it or changed it. It only cried from fear, loud noises, or when someone unfamiliar approached too quickly. Its reactions were sharper than a human child, more sensitive to sound and emotion. The medics began to study it, taking notes, but Ethan remained protective. He did not want anyone to separate the child from Lyra or from him. He felt a deep responsibility, one he had never felt before. Lyra began to trust Ethan with more than just the baby. She allowed him to help organize their small camp, gathering supplies, setting up sleeping areas, and keeping watch. Ethan noticed small details, how the aliens reacted to humans, what made them nervous, and how to approach each situation calmly. Slowly, he became a bridge between the two groups. The survivors began to follow his lead, trusting his judgment even if they did not fully understand him. One evening, Lyra sat beside Ethan, watching the baby play with a small piece of cloth. "You help us," she said softly. "Why?" Ethan looked at her, thinking. "Because it is right," he replied simply. She studied him, trying to understand. "But humans, many humans, they hurt," she said. Ethan nodded. "I know," he said. "But not all humans. Some of us, we try to care." The baby reached up and grabbed Ethan's finger, gurgling happily. Lyra smiled, a small, genuine smile. She began to see the truth in his words. Days turned into weeks. Ethan continued to care for the baby, teach Lyra, and guide the small group of alien survivors. They began to work together, building small shelters, finding clean water, and keeping the area safe from patrols and dangers. Ethan taught simple ways to avoid danger, using his experience as a soldier to protect the group. Lyra followed his instructions, her trust in him growing each day. One night, while the group slept, Lyra woke to find Ethan still awake, watching over the baby. She sat beside him quietly. "You do not sleep," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "I cannot," he said softly. "Not yet. I want to make sure you and the baby are safe." She reached out, touching his arm lightly. "You care too much," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "It is not too much," he said. "It is what we should do." The baby stirred, sensing their presence, and cooed softly. They both smiled, watching the child sleep peacefully, unaware of the world outside. As time passed, Ethan realized that the bond between him, Lyra, and the baby was more than survival. It was connection, trust, and care. The baby had brought them together, and through it he had learned a truth he had never considered in the middle of war, that even in destruction, life could create hope. He began to see small signs in the other survivors. They spoke more gently. They followed his instructions, and they began to care for the baby themselves. Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. He had not only protected one life, but had shown that compassion could cross boundaries, even between species. Lyra began to teach Ethan about her people's culture, showing small drawings of past celebrations, explaining gestures, and teaching simple songs. Ethan listened carefully, trying to mimic the sounds. The baby cooed and responded happily to both of them. Through these small interactions, a sense of peace settled over their small group. They were still surrounded by war, but for these few hours each day they could forget the fighting and simply be a family. One afternoon, a distant rumble echoed across the ruins. Ethan stood quickly, holding the baby close. Lyra and the survivors watched as he scanned the horizon, "Storm coming," he said simply. He helped the group reinforce their shelters and protect the baby from the wind and rain. When the storm hit, they huddled together under tarps and debris, listening to the rain hammering on the ground. Ethan held the baby close, speaking softly. The infant relaxed immediately, finding comfort in his voice. Lyra watched in awe, realizing that this human soldier's presence had become a source of safety, comfort, and hope. After the storm passed, Ethan checked on everyone. The survivors were wet and tired but unharmed. The baby played happily, exploring the small cleared area with curiosity. Lyra laughed softly, picking up her child and holding it close. She looked at Ethan with deep gratitude. "We can survive. Because of you," she said. Ethan shook his head. "No," he replied. "We survive because we care for each other." The baby cooed, reaching for him again. Lyra smiled, understanding his words more clearly now. In the following days, Ethan and Lyra worked together to build stronger shelters, find food, and keep the baby safe. Their bond grew stronger, as did their understanding of each other. Ethan learned more about alien customs, language, and emotions, while Lyra learned simple English and the human way of life. The baby thrived in this environment, a living reminder of the connection between two worlds. Ethan realized that his mission had changed. It was no longer just about surviving the war or following orders. It was about protecting this fragile life, building trust and showing that even in the midst of destruction, humans could be compassionate. He felt a deep responsibility, one that went beyond duty or honor. It was personal. It was about life, hope, and the bonds that could exist across species. And so, in the quiet ruins of a shattered world, Ethan Cole, Lyra, and the baby lived each day with careful attention, love, and courage. Small moments of laughter, coos, and shared understanding became the foundation of a fragile peace. The baby's cries had stopped, but its presence had created something even more important. A bridge between human and alien, a chance for hope in a world filled with fear, and the beginning of a story that neither war nor hatred could destroy. The days of quiet were ending. Ethan sensed it in the air. Human patrols moved closer, and distant explosions reminded everyone that the war had not forgotten them. The small group of alien survivors worked harder to gather food, water, and shelter materials. Lyra stayed close to Ethan, holding the baby, watching him carefully. She had learned to trust him, but the dangers of the outside world pressed heavily on her mind. She whispered softly to the baby, singing low tones to calm it, and the infant cooed, stretching tiny hands toward Ethan whenever he came near. One morning, a human officer arrived from the base. He was tall, strict, and spoke with authority. "We've decided to relocate all alien survivors," he said, looking around the ruins. "They will be moved to a secure facility for protection and study." Ethan's stomach tightened. He knew exactly what that meant. The baby would be separated from Lyra. It would be taken from the only mother it had known since the bombing. Lyra's eyes widened in terror. She clutched the baby tightly, shaking. "You cannot do that," Ethan said firmly. The officer frowned. "These are orders. Humans are responsible for their safety. We will take the child and mother for processing." Ethan stepped closer, blocking the path. "They are not objects," he said. "This baby is alive, sensitive, and it belongs with its mother. If you separate them, it could be harmed." The officer's expression hardened. "We follow orders," he said simply. Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke. "Please." "No, my baby." "It is mine," she pleaded, her green eyes wide and desperate. Ethan held her hand, squeezing it gently. He could feel her fear and desperation. He knew he could not allow anyone to harm or separate them. He had to act even if it meant breaking orders. That night, Ethan made a decision. He would not let Lyra and the baby be taken. He waited until the officer and the patrol were asleep, then woke Lyra quietly. "We leave now," he whispered. She looked at him, shocked. "Run?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I will protect you. Stay close. No one separates you from the baby." Lyra hesitated, then nodded, understanding that she had no other choice. She wrapped the baby tightly and followed him into the ruins. The city outside was dark and dangerous. Debris blocked paths. Smoke lingered in low areas, and distant sounds of gunfire reminded them of the ever-present danger. Ethan led the way carefully, moving silently through streets and broken buildings. Lyra followed closely, holding the baby to her chest. Every step was calculated. They could not afford mistakes. Every noise, every shadow could mean death. As they approached the edge of the ruins, a human patrol appeared in the distance. Ethan crouched behind a fallen wall, peering through the cracks. He counted the soldiers, 4 of them armed, alert, scanning for movement. He whispered to Lyra, "Wait, stay low. Don't move until I tell you." She nodded, gripping the baby tightly. Ethan's heart pounded, but he remained calm. He knew any panic would alarm the baby and put them all at risk. After a tense few minutes, Ethan saw an opening. He whispered to Lyra, "Now." They ran low and fast, jumping over rubble and ducking under beams. The patrol shouted, realizing something was moving, but Ethan's careful timing kept them ahead. They reached an old bridge that led to the neutral zone, a place controlled by alien guards who were friendly to Lyra's people. Ethan slowed only when they were safely within sight of the guards. The alien guards saw them and immediately aimed their weapons. Lyra screamed, holding the baby above her head. Ethan stepped forward, protecting them both, and raised his hands. "We mean no harm," he said, his voice calm but firm. The guards hesitated. One of them, older and scarred, stepped forward and recognized Lyra. He lowered his weapon. "She is from our medical caste," he said. "And the child is safe with you?" Ethan nodded. The baby cooed softly in his arms, and the guards allowed them to pass. Once inside the safe zone, Lyra collapsed to the ground, holding her baby tightly. Ethan knelt beside her, checking for injuries. "You are safe now," he said gently. Lyra looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You saved us," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "We saved each other," he replied softly. The baby cooed and stretched its tiny arms, and Lyra smiled, holding it close. The next morning, Ethan helped the survivors settle into the safe zone. Alien families and children moved cautiously, still wary of humans, but Lyra's presence reassured them. She stayed close to Ethan, showing him the paths, teaching him about customs and pointing out potential dangers. Ethan listened carefully, learning more about her people and how to protect them in this new environment. But safety was temporary. Scouts reported that human forces were searching nearby. Ethan knew they could not stay long. He spent hours planning escape routes, checking supplies, and teaching Lyra how to keep the baby calm during stress. The child responded instantly to his voice, cooing and stretching its hands, a small comfort amidst the danger. Lyra watched, amazed at his patience and care. One afternoon, Ethan noticed signs that soldiers had discovered their escape route. Tracks, broken debris, and disturbed soil marked the path they had used. He realized that more patrols were coming. He gathered the group, explaining in simple words and gestures that they needed to move quickly and quietly. Lyra clutched the baby, listening intently, and the other survivors followed Ethan's instructions without hesitation. As they moved through a narrow canyon, gunfire echoed from above. Ethan led them into a side path, ducking behind rocks and broken walls. He shielded Lyra and the baby, keeping them low and calm. The baby stirred but did not cry. Sensing Ethan's presence and calm voice, Lyra whispered softly, "How do you stay so calm?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Focus," he said. "On what matters. Nothing else." She nodded, gripping the baby tightly. They reached a small river and crossed carefully, using fallen logs and rocks to avoid noise. The patrols followed, shouting and firing sporadically, but Ethan kept them ahead with careful planning. He noticed the baby's reactions. Every small sound made it alert, but as long as he spoke softly and held it close, it remained calm. Lyra marveled at his ability to protect them all. Hours later, they reached another alien outpost, a larger and safer zone. Guards checked them carefully, and Lyra explained quickly that the baby was sensitive to humans and that Ethan had been protecting them. The guards nodded, allowing them to stay. Ethan set up a temporary shelter for Lyra and the baby, ensuring warmth, food, and safety. The baby cooed, reaching for Ethan, and Lyra smiled, holding it close. For the first time in days, they could rest without immediate fear. That night, Ethan sat outside, keeping watch. Lyra slept beside the baby, exhausted but safe. He thought about the choices he had made, disobeying orders, risking his life, and leading them through danger. He realized that his sense of duty had changed. It was no longer about following rules or completing missions. It was about protecting life, trust, and hope. The baby had taught him that even in a war-torn world, small acts of courage and care could make a difference. The following days were spent rebuilding trust among the survivors, reinforcing shelters, and planning for longer-term safety. Ethan taught Lyra and the others how to stay calm during patrols, how to communicate quietly, and how to protect the baby. Lyra watched, learning quickly, and the baby thrived in the secure environment. The bond between Ethan, Lyra, and the child grew stronger, a symbol of hope amidst destruction. Yet, the war loomed in the distance. Ethan knew that one day, the humans or other threats would find them again. He resolved to be ready to protect Lyra and the baby at any cost. He realized that their survival depended not just on strength but on trust, care, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. And as he looked at the baby's bright eyes and Lyra's grateful smile, he knew that he would not fail them no matter the danger. The sun rose slowly over the alien safe zone, casting soft golden light across the ruins and shelters. Ethan sat near the fire, holding the baby in his arms, watching it stretch tiny fingers and yawn. Lyra was nearby, arranging supplies and talking softly to other survivors. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter, though tension still lingered on the edges. Ethan knew the war was not over. Soldiers could arrive at any moment, orders could change, and dangers could come from any direction. Yet for now they were safe. The baby looked up at Ethan, its green eyes bright and curious. It cooed and reached for him. Ethan smiled, lowering his face close. "Good morning," he whispered softly. The baby laughed quietly, a sound that warmed Ethan's heart. He realized how much he had grown attached in just a few weeks. This tiny life, fragile and sensitive, had become a reason to fight for more than orders or missions. It had become a reason to fight for hope. Lyra approached, her eyes soft but serious. "We cannot stay here forever," she said, touching the baby gently. "Humans, they will come. We must move to a safer place soon." Ethan nodded. He had anticipated this. The patrols would continue to search, and the fragile peace they had built could be broken at any time. "We will move," he said calmly. "But we will stay together. No one separates you from the baby." Lyra smiled faintly, feeling relief and gratitude. That afternoon, Ethan led the group through narrow paths and hidden trails, carefully avoiding areas where patrols might search. Lyra carried the baby most of the time, but Ethan stayed close, speaking softly, keeping the child calm. The baby listened to his voice, cooing and occasionally reaching for him. Other survivors watched in awe, realizing that this human soldier's presence was a shield, a comfort, and a source of hope. As they approached a larger alien settlement, guards emerged to meet them. They were wary at first, weapons raised, but Lyra stepped forward, holding the baby high. She spoke quickly in her language, explaining who they were and why they had come. Ethan stood beside her, keeping his hands visible, calm and steady. The baby cooed at the guards, responding to Ethan's soft tones. Slowly, the tension faded and the guards lowered their weapons. One of them, an older alien with scars across his face, nodded. "They are safe," he said. "Let them enter." Inside the settlement, Ethan helped Lyra and the baby settle into a small, secure dwelling. Supplies were provided and other aliens came to greet them. Lyra introduced Ethan to the leaders, explaining his role in protecting her and the child. The leaders exchanged quiet looks and slowly began to understand the importance of his actions. They had always seen humans as invaders, as threats, but here was a human who had risked his life to protect an alien mother and her infant. That evening, Ethan sat with Lyra and the baby near a small fire. The child was playing with a piece of cloth, laughing and gurgling happily. Lyra watched them both, her eyes filled with gratitude and amazement. "I do not understand," she said softly. "Why does it listen to you?" "Only you?" Ethan shook his head gently. "I do not know," he said. "Maybe it knows I will keep it safe. Maybe it feels calm with me. That is all that matters." She nodded, smiling faintly, her trust in him deeper than ever. Over the next few days, Ethan helped the settlement organize defenses, shared knowledge of human tactics, and taught simple ways to keep the baby calm during alarms or disturbances. Lyra and other adults learned quickly, and the baby continued to thrive, its health and spirit improving day by day. Ethan noticed small changes in the other aliens. They began to speak to humans differently, to observe that kindness could exist even among those who were once enemies. One morning, a messenger arrived from the human command. Ethan met him outside, expecting orders. The officer looked stern at first, then confused when Ethan explained the situation. "This child," Ethan said firmly, "cannot be separated from its mother. It has only known her since birth. Separating them would harm the child." The officer paused, looking at the infant in Ethan's arms, and finally nodded slowly. "We will respect your judgment," he said, though reluctantly. Ethan felt a quiet relief. He had protected them once more, and it seemed his efforts had earned recognition, however small. That evening, Lyra and Ethan sat together outside the settlement. The baby slept peacefully between them. Lyra's hand rested lightly on Ethan's arm. "You saved my child," she whispered. Ethan shook his head, smiling softly. "I did what was right," he said. "We saved each other." She nodded, understanding more than words could express. The baby stirred, reaching for Ethan, and Lyra laughed softly, the sound like music in the quiet night. Days turned into weeks. The settlement became a safe home for Lyra, her baby, and the other survivors. Ethan continued to teach, protect, and care. But he also learned from the aliens. He learned about patience, community, and the value of trust. The baby thrived under their combined care. Growing stronger, curious, and joyful, it had survived the dangers of war, the terror of separation, and now it was learning to laugh and explore in safety. One day Lyra approached Ethan, holding the baby. "We thank you," she said softly. "Not only for protecting, but for showing us humans can care." Ethan smiled, looking down at the child. "We all can," he said. "It is what we should do, always." The baby gurgled and reached for him, as if agreeing. Lyra laughed gently, tears in her eyes. She had never imagined such hope could exist. Not in war, not in destruction. But here it was, alive and real. As weeks passed, the settlement began to thrive. Children played, adults worked together, and the survivors found a new rhythm of life. Ethan remained with Lyra and the baby, still vigilant, still caring, but also sharing in small joys. Watching the baby take its first steps, hearing its first clear words, and seeing the smiles of other children in the settlement, he realized that his role had become more than soldier. It had become protector, teacher, and friend. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in red and gold, Lyra sat beside Ethan near the fire. The baby slept between them. "You changed our world," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, his expression calm but thoughtful. "No," he said softly. "You changed it too. Your trust, your courage. It made this possible. We did it together." She smiled, understanding fully now. The baby stirred, stretching tiny arms, and they laughed quietly together. The war still raged far away, but here, in this small corner of the universe, life had won. Trust, care, and hope had survived. Ethan knew the future would bring challenges, but he also knew that they had created something stronger than fear. They had built a bond between human and alien, between mother and child, and between two worlds that had once been enemies. As night fell, Ethan looked at the stars, the baby sleeping safely in his arms, Lyra resting beside him. He felt a deep sense of peace. He had risked everything, broken orders, and faced danger. But in return, he had saved a life, built trust, and proven that compassion could exist even in the darkest times. Lyra squeezed his hand, smiling, and he returned it, knowing that this connection, simple, human, and true, was a victory greater than any battle. The baby stirred again, cooing softly, and both Lyra and Ethan laughed quietly. It was a sound of life, of hope, of the promise that even in a universe filled with war and fear, kindness could prevail. Ethan realized that this small family, a human, an alien mother, and her child, was proof that courage and care could cross worlds, that empathy could survive destruction, and that life, fragile and precious, could always find a way. And in that quiet moment under the stars, with the baby sleeping safely and Lyra smiling beside him, Ethan understood the truth he had learned over these weeks. The greatest strength of humanity was not in weapons, orders, or battles, but in the heart, in courage, and in the simple choice to care for life, no matter the cost. For Lyra, for her child, and for himself, he had chosen compassion over fear. He had chosen hope over destruction, and in the soft glow of the firelight amidst a world of ruins, he had found a new purpose: to protect, to nurture, and to show that even a single human could change the course of many lives. They stayed there for the night, and Ethan whispered softly to the baby, "You are safe now. We will always protect you." The baby reached for him, cooing in agreement. Lyra rested her head on his shoulder, smiling, feeling the warmth of a life saved, a bond formed, and a future bright with possibility. And so, in a universe torn by war and fear, 3 lives, human, alien, and child, found peace, hope, and a new beginning, proving that even in darkness, the light of compassion could shine brighter than any weapon, stronger than any fear, and longer than any war.